It's an honor tonight, today, being with all of you to talk about someone who's very, very close to our heart and to mine. I met the great Sir Ken many, many, many years ago. I was at TED. It was when he did that very, very famous talk that just blew my mind. And I never thought I would get to know him at that point, because he became kind of this icon to me, because he was speaking to me, aside from the fact that I was creating a program for children at that time, so they could be happier, freer in the classroom, healthier, an ability to do something where there was no really wrong answer, because I was seeing the children's distress, their silent distress, their anxiety. I was looking at the suicide rates. It was all too much for me. The sadness, the fear, the anxiety that was going on in school and with our little ones. But then when I met him and I sat and I listened to him, it changed so much of my life, because when he speaks about creativity and he speaks about the classroom, I was one of those little girls. I didn't do well in school. I was a ballet dancer. But I remember certain things, like my mom, wondered why I didn't have a reading book when I was in second grade. And my boyfriend, who was then my best friend, we walked home from school together, and my mother said, "Why doesn't Goldie have a reading book?" And he said, "Oh, because she's too dumb." And so my mom said to me, what is the purple balls, Goldie? I said, "Oh, I'm the only one in it." And I thought it was a really good thing to be the only one in it. But actually, I was the worst reader in the class. And then when they asked me to draw and color, I colored all the fruit yellow. The apple was red and so forth. But they asked me why I did that. And I remember saying, because I like yellow. So I realized that going through school, I didn't think that I was very smart, but I knew how to dance. And I had support there. But what about all the other children that don't have that, that actually can become something in their lifetime when they actually are given the okay to be odd or different or creative instead of not so good at math? Does that really mean that your life is going to be terrible? When I'm hearing all of this, I thought, I want to know this man. I want him to be my friend. And he became my friend. And we would have dinner together. We would have cocktails together with Terry. He moved and lived right down the street from me. And I learned what kind of a man he was, not just what kind of a genius he was, not the fact that he lived and spoke and so forth outside the box. He was a great man. He cared very much. He was extraordinarily funny and a great human who spent his whole life looking after those of us who were different, and those of us who actually did pretty darn well in life. So his world of educating, of making people laugh through his deep, deep wisdom and his goodness, has been not just his legacy, but anyone who will come in contact with Ken. They too will become elevated by his words, by his heart, by his wisdom. And if only we would be able to have this kind of mindset in our education system globally, we would have a much peaceful world, more peaceful, happier world. And we would have ingenuity. And it wouldn't just be rote learning. It would be creative, innovative. And these are the people outside the box that sometimes change the world. So when I think of Ken, I think of all the things that I wish that we could continue to do. I dream about that. But the one thing that I do know is that he inspired me, not just as a friendship, but he inspired me as a tenacious, never giving up human. Never give up. That we want our children to be educated completely, the whole child. Not just to gain grades, but to gain wisdom, fearlessness, an ability to not be afraid to fail. Because failure is really important. We can't protect our children from that. We're not giving them the opportunity to grow or to even understand how to get better. And it's okay to fail. It's how we learn. So this tenacity of spirit will live on as long as I live. And hopefully we all will have some impact for all of our children everywhere to have the opportunity to discover all the aspects of who they are and be able to list the good things about them, to look at who they are and honor the good things about them so they can move on in the world, be a part of the world, and not be rejected because the greatest school didn't want them. Life is the greatest school. And the ability to feel free and open and trustful that what they think and what they can do might be different. So I honor Sir Ken Robinson. I honor his beloved family. And I love that we're all together. I will always follow his dream. Imagine if. Thank you.
Welcome everybody to Imagine If Week. I'm Dido Bala, Director of Educational Innovation and Partnership at MindUP, and I am so happy to have a global panel. We have Narita, who's all the way from Amman, Jordan. We have Cheryl, who's all the way in the Northern Territories in Australia. We have David here in Florida, Miami, and I'm also in Florida. But I'm really happy to have these people together because one thing we know from Sir Ken Robinson is he's always said, use your imagination, lean into your imagination, lead with your imagination. And so since we are here today and we are able to be together through Zoom because of the pandemic, we just wonder, what if we reimagine education? What would it look like? What could it look like if instead of waiting for the next pandemic, we actually said, today, right now, let's get these brilliant minds and get them together to just think and talk and mind jam about what I think education might be like. And that's what we're talking about today. So right away, I'm gonna just ask, when you think about imagine if and what education could be like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And anybody just jump in.
Could be a mix of all the experience that we've been through during this pandemic, along with what we have been doing for the past years as educators. I think reimagining the educational system, as you said, that I think should be an educational system that is more equitable and more resilient, definitely.
And I think it's given us the real freedom to put well-being at the front of the conversation. You know, we've got decades of research showing how important it is, how it's important for our mental health and academic outcomes, but it's still, you know, in conversations in schools, it's still, yep, we've got so many other things that kind of get in the way. And now we've suddenly got this freedom to go, yep, it's okay to make well-being really important. And to have it present in our school. It's now just everyone's conversation, and it's everybody's job. It's not just the wellbeing officer. It's not just the counsellor who comes in maybe on a Friday afternoon delivering something. It's actually everybody's job.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal that word. I'm gonna borrow it, the word freedom. I think when I imagine a perfect education system, or I imagine an education system that serves boys and girls across the board equitably, I imagine an education system that allows the child to be more free. I think, very often in a lot of circumstances, children, they don't get to express or explore their true talents and interests within school, because it's just so, here's a box, here's a box, here's a box. And then when they get lost in trying to fit into binaries, and they can't really discover, right, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to do. So I imagine an education system that caters to the freedom and the innocence of a child.
I'm just taking it in. I'm taking it in because that idea of boxes, right? And we teach kids that somehow there's one box that's yours, and then they start believing that once you fit into that one box, you can't even look on the right side to the other box. But if the kid is like, I don't know, but I kind of like that too, then they start to wonder, well, does that mean I need to abandon this one and go into that one? What do you guys think about that concept?
It's scary. It's scary because I think like it turns them into robots. And when they attempt to subscribe to that one binary, or they start chasing that one thing, and they realize, hey, like you said, there's a box here, there's a box here, there's a box here, and somebody's pulling them in like, no. Don't look at those two boxes. Stay right here, go to college, get out, don't come back to your neighborhood. For me, at least, those are things that I heard coming up in public education here in Miami. But I was interested in so many different things. And sometimes I sit back and I wonder, what if I didn't subscribe to one thing? What if I didn't subscribe to the thoughts of one person, and I actually tried every single box, and then I created a new box that was more fulfilling?
Yeah, I agree with you, David. Yeah, definitely. So we're just limiting our kids just not to think in any other way, just one way. It's always one way, one direction. We're not actually giving them the space to explore, to come up with their own, let's say, path, or with their own way to carry on and try and experiment things, and then move on. It's okay to fall. It's okay to move back. Yet you have to just keep on trying and move forward. Instead of doing that, we're actually just limiting them. You have to go from point 1 all the way to point B, and then to point C, and then voila, that's it. That's your way. And it is scary.
Let's dream then. Let's dream. I just read a quote on the website, right? Like, imagine if we value dancing as much as math, for example. Let's actually dream. Think about the actual classroom. What are some dreams that we could have that you would want to see the education system take on? Is it something like as simple as let every child discover who they are, and then once we see who they are, let's lean into that to educate them, for example? Or is it let's make it okay to try multiple things, and then once you see the one that makes sense, you pursue that. If you change your mind, it's okay. Like, what concretely, what do you think you could dream of that can transform your classroom? Let's go there.
I think it's exciting when students get a choice. And I think when you talk about boxes and all of that, they're not getting necessarily a choice in their education. And, you know, in Australia, we had this big survey, and it was like 30% of children felt that they didn't have a choice in their education. And it's such a big part of their day, every day. If they could just have a choice and a say in how they're being educated, I think that would be amazing, because then they're leading their education and we're just on the journey with them and supporting them in the direction that they want to go.
I think as a teacher, if I dream of something, I'd actually dream of how to be able to have my own space as an educator and bond with my students. I know that as teachers, we do have a scope and sequence that we need to cover and subjects that we need to go over. Yet at the same time, I do feel the necessity of spending this kind of time optimizing the mental health of my students, having the space, enough space that I need to teach them skills, teach them approaches, to help them become, to help them have this kind of mind-body connection, become more aware of themselves, their emotions. You know what's so sad about our students? I teach primary, and it's so hard to see our students in their age. They do not know how to express themselves. They don't know how to communicate their feelings. It's just like they burst into tantrums, and that's it. So having the space that I dream of as an educator, in terms of just me as a teacher, I teach students, I don't teach subjects only, you know? So I just want to teach them. I just want to be with them, bond with them, help them become a better version of themselves, try to navigate through themselves, their feelings and emotions, try to control the way they respond, instead of reacting to any situation, any negative situation that they come across maybe, or they face in their life. I just dream of an educational system that would give us an opportunity as educators to actually have a magic wand and change the lives of those students, not only focusing on the academics. I know the academics are important, of course. However, it is actually now the time to chart a new vision when we're talking about education, to shed a lot of light on the well-being, on their emotions, on their skills that they need to adopt now, so that it could help them when they grow up.
Yeah, that was a very solid answer, both of them. I would imagine the education system for Miami. I think all over. I think we all face very similar problems. But I'm thinking about a place that when we think about the learner, right? We think about the learner first before we think about the state, or before we think about what we can get out of this child, as if it should be transactional, because it shouldn't. I'm imagining a system that isn't based on memorization, or isn't based on standardized tests, or one that puts the student at the forefront of what we do. I think students, by the time they get to high school, I taught at the high school level and the middle school level, by the time they get up to high school, they become so mechanical, where in the classroom, they can only think about one thing, and that one thing is, I have to pass the test. And it directly isolates so many other students who for years have been failing the same tests over and over and over again. So these students who fail over and over and over again, by the time they get to their last chance, essentially, they've already given up inside. So I would imagine a system where, yes, we have some sort of way to measure a child's aptitude, but one that doesn't weigh so heavily on the child's future, one that doesn't weigh so heavily on the child's ability to get out of the school and into something that they really want to do, and something that they really enjoy. And I think if students knew how to learn at an early level, then a lot of things change in the classroom as they move through levels. Students, I tell my students all the time, like, before we talk about material, let's talk about how we should learn and internalize this information before you think about regurgitating it back to me. Because I know you can repeat what I just said. I know you can remember 10 topics that we just talked about, but what does it mean to feel what you're using and then use that in your daily real world lives and conversations? And what I'm saying is, a lot of kids, they get it in the class because they have to apply it to a test. But when it's time to actually talk about it, or when it's time to apply it, or when it's time to share it, very often they can't do it because they haven't taken the steps to internalize it on the inside and come up with their own language to give it back to their peers, or even to me.
I think about that because, look, and I'm curious, this is actually a question. Since last year when the pandemic started, I imagine from what I have heard from teachers that I train that things have not been normal in the classroom. So there's a gap that is being created because the usual standards, it's a little difficult, a lot more difficult to actually even attempt to meet them during the pandemic. Because look, if a kid doesn't know if they are going to have access to a good computer to get on Zoom to be in class, do you really think that what they're going to care about is mastering the standard of identifying a main idea in a text? I don't think so. If a kid has anxiety for having to break the routine that they were used to, the last thing they care about is meeting some standard that don't have anything to do with that. So I'm just curious, since there's been this gap, what do we replace that with? Like if on a typical day, back in Australia for you, in Jordan, here in Miami, if on a typical day you were supposed to teach these objectives, since those objectives kind of had to kind of take the back burner a little bit by default, like they had to, because we're dealing with a pandemic, what's replacing that? Because I think that is an opportunity to find things that matter more, which is everything you've talked about, everything that matters more, and actually make that what the new standards are. That's just get me dreaming again. So I just wonder, in your context, how did you deal with that shift? And is there really an opportunity to actually change things because the pandemic has changed the way the system works?
As a startup, it was really challenging at the beginning when we started with online learning. It wasn't easy on us as adults. How about kids? Us adapting to the new scenario or the new situation when it comes to learning, it wasn't really that easy. However, I always thought about one thing. It's that teachers are the ones that create a difference in their students' lives. It's not actually the classroom. It's not the setting. It's not the classroom. Whether we're talking about a classroom that is a physical and actual classroom or a virtual one. So I kept on reminding myself with the fact that it's me who is creating the difference in their lives. So they should see me modeling the resilience and modeling me coping with the new situation, so they can actually adapt faster and they can actually come along the way faster with me. So I do believe that teachers, as a human factor, when it comes to education, they're the key factor. They're the key player. I do understand that despite the fact that technology and its greater use nowadays is actually maybe more, let's say, inevitable. However, you can never replace a great teacher. That's a fact. And I think everyone around the world has came to an agreement, or they have realized the importance of having teachers, because again, I'm going to repeat, we do not teach subjects, we do teach students. So to me, modeling it to my students, the resilience and trying to cope with the change, trying to overcome my stress to let it out, actually helped me a lot to build a solid ground for my students to start accepting the idea of learning online or virtually.
Yeah, there's this expectation that even though we've left traditional schooling, there should still be traditional things happening in the classroom, and very often, like you said, that's super hard considering that students are going through things in their lives. So not only does the pandemic affect us as teachers, the pandemic affects them as learners. But I do think what's important is, I guess, that emotional intelligence piece, being able to know your students and being able to pay attention to those cues that this student is slowly burning out. So when we have this expectation that a student, especially in Miami, a student should still have 6, 7, or 8 classes a day virtually in front of a camera. Meanwhile, there's all types of things going on in their environment at home. I think it disrupts the learning process, because now it's not about paying attention to the teacher. It's not about paying attention to the content. It's not about paying attention to the subject. It's more about, can I make it to that 55 minute? Can I make it to the 60 minute? Can I make it to the 90-minute block on this computer just so I can keep moving on. But if we pay attention to the emotional side of it and we notice those cues and we're like, you know what, maybe we need to reduce the amount of classes, reduce the amount of time the student is on Zoom, incorporate more activities where students are taking breaks, students are being able to express the way they feel, right? So that we can get back into the actual content. But I think to say, hey, open your brain and let me shove all this information, let me shove all this content inside of you, to me is just absurd that there are systems who are like, no, it doesn't matter if you're on Zoom, it doesn't matter what this child is going through at home, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we have one thing we need to do, and that's hit those standards. Let's move forward so we can go ahead and take this state test, so we can go ahead and continue to do traditional things when there's nothing traditional about what we're seeing. Is we have an opportunity to create something new, to imagine something new, but we got to throw away the old stuff and lean closer to, like you said, teaching students.
And I guess we had a very different situation, especially here in the Northern Territory, because we didn't go online. We were in this like little bubble because we didn't have any community transmission in the Northern Territory. We were very, very blessed. Students went home for a couple of days towards the end of term one, around April, but didn't actually fully go online. And then so everything just went kind of back to normal, but not so normal. Because in our remote communities, where a lot of our schools are also, they were in a biosecurity lockdown. So staff that were used to being able to go home for the holidays to see their family were locked into the community basically for months at a time. So what came out of that was that relationships and connections within those communities became so important, where teachers would normally go into town on a weekend or on the holidays. They were in with the local teaching staff and the local community people. So the community people would invite them out to, you know, show them their country and participate in cultural activities that didn't happen or may not have happened as often without that. So there was all this stress for teachers, but you know, different to other parts of the world, but still everybody sort of supported each other, and different events and connections, I guess, yeah, and things that would promote their team building and all of that sort of thing happened that weren't happening before the pandemic.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing then is, so from Narita's point about a teacher, I mean, you can't replace a teacher. That and you know how I knew that? When people felt like it was possible that schools were actually going to close 100% and everybody panicked. That's when the world realized, oh no, we actually can't do it without you guys. It's like, no way, we have to figure something out. It doesn't matter if it's virtual, in person, hybrid, something in the middle. We need to figure this out because we need you. So that was the first realization. And then to further your point, that one individual, the teacher, you have so much power every single day. Those kids look up to you in a way that you will never understand. If you think about mirror neurons, those kids' brains are wired to look at you and mimic the way you deal with stress, mimic the way you learn, the way you communicate. I mean, you're so powerful. And for you to realize that you are a human being, and the more they see you as a human being, the better it is. That's an awesome realization. So for me, even though the pandemic is what shed light on that, that's a good thing. From that to David's point about redefining what the standards are, you can't assume that just because we are still in school, that school can continue to be what it used to be. It really can't, right? Something as simple as, think about it, 5 classes back to back to back, or 6 on the computer. I mean, that can't be healthy. That can't be healthy for anyone, especially not for a kid. So it's time for us to reimagine what things should look like. And I have the sun coming in. It makes it look like I'm coming from the sky, from the clouds. a little bit here. So it's a little better. So reimagining those standards to fit what the world actually is now. And then you go into the relationships that Cheryl is talking about. If you don't have that human connection, learning is going to be difficult. Like, right? We know that you are teaching people and you are a person. So what I want to close with is, we're in different continents, and yet we find a clear common ground in what we think education can do better. To me, this is dreaming, but it's possible. Because I think as we move forward in this system, we realize that it doesn't matter where you are geographically. If we think the same way and we get together, we can change things. We can change things. We have similar problems. Like, who would have thought that Miami and Amman would have similar problems in education? But yet here we are. So I think that this is a charge that we can take and lead and continue, not just the conversations, but every now and then gather people from different places around the world and dream this way, because the more we do it, the more we come up with actual plans that can actually make the education system better. So for me, just imagine if it's not just a dream, it's actually possible. And as a last point, I just wonder, how possible do you think all these things are? Are we just dreaming, or is there an actual way, you think, to make some of these ideas come true?
Dido, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. So let us just dream, and eventually the future will belong to us, Dido, I think. We'll eventually be able to figure out a way, I'm sure. As passionate educators, as passionate people with a beautiful soul, we're looking towards a change, a brighter, let's say, future for the kids that we teach. I am sure that we are going to make it happen sooner or later. So let us just believe in our dreams.
And I think again, this will sort of give us the freedom to maybe re-look at how education of teachers is, where well-being becomes a bigger part of that. It's not just about when you go to university, you learn how to teach a child how to read, how to teach maths, early years, or the high school subjects, where well-being, I can see there's a reality that may be a real focus in the university teaching, that then we're not waiting till they get to the school and then, they're talking to the counselor or someone about, okay, my students have some problems. They're already armed with some tools to address that and build and really teach the whole child, rather than, like we say, we're not there to teach subjects, it's teaching the whole child. And I think if we're starting at the university level for that education, then yeah, it's really possible, and we can certainly be optimistic about that.
I agree. I wish I could just say I agree and then bow out. I think those are, yeah, I agree 100%. I think the power is in the people. And I think at the end of the day, if our mind can conceive it, then 100% is something that can be done. And I think it's just being brave enough to challenge those systems that are put in place. But there are ideas, there are thoughts, there are so many things out there in the community that we should just be considering. There should be conversations. There should be more events like this, where those people who are in power are listening. They're listening closely. They're listening to engage. They're listening to change. But I 100% think that because we all have these ideas of a better education system, we all have these ideas, we have these visions of what it looks like. When we imagine, you see a very clear image. Right? It's not a murky image, or it's not distorted. You see an end goal. You've already painted a complete picture. And I think if more of us can get together and imagine and show our complete picture, we'll realize that we have a lot more things in common than we think we do. So we should all just imagine together.
Love it. One of my favorite quotes from Sir Ken Robinson is, "You are the system. So if you want to change the system, change yourself." So we are doing our part in changing ourselves. And we invite more of you guys to look into changing yourself so we can make the system better for the kids and keep dreaming. Thank you guys. This has been amazing.